Welcome to Beauty and the Beast, where we create a safe haven for Black men to engage in deep conversations and share their journeys in a judgment-free space.
In each episode, we dive into topics that matter, from identity and relationships to personal growth and resilience. This is a space where your story is valued, your voice is heard, and your journey is shared with others who, like you, may feel alone in the world.
Join us as we normalize conversations that are too often left unspoken and build a community rooted in support, understanding, and empowerment. Whether you're seeking connection, inspiration, or simply a place to be yourself, you're in the right place.
Through heartfelt storytelling and insightful dialogue, the podcast aims to dismantle stigma and foster a deeper understanding of the emotional landscapes navigated by Black men, ultimately highlighting the beauty that emerges from their journeys. Let's break the myth that Black men are beasts. I'm Malik Baraka, leadership coach, skills trainer, workshop facilitator, and a man of the culture.
My name is Kyle Ball, University of Miami Hurricane, corporate leader, advocate for mental health, and movie producer. Welcome to Beauty and the Beast. Let's start the conversation.
Say, what's going on, man?
What's going on?
Well, much happy to have you here, man. I'm glad you could join us.
Happy to be here. Glad y'all called me up, man. This is going to be dope.
Well, you know, this man said you needed to be here, so I was like, well, then absolutely you need to be here.
Well, let's get into it.
All right. So, my understanding is you were a track athlete in college.
Yes, sir.
You were a corporate professional.
Yep.
You
Definitely.
are a father to a beautiful daughter who I got to meet.
Yeah.
You are a husband. But the most interesting thing that I really want to talk about, but we'll get there.
Mm-hmm.
Hip hop artist. Okay.
Man.
You know,
Yeah.
touring.
All of
Okay.
that. All of that. All of that.
So the way we like to get this started is setting that as the backdrop. You doing all those things. Oh, yeah, an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
You doing all those things, but what in your childhood set you on that journey?
Man, that's a great question. What set me on that journey as far as, so, you know, I grew up in the 80s. You know, hip hop is 50, I'm 47. Hip hop was like my big brother. You know what I mean? My parents come from, you know, both parents in the household. My dad was always into like counseling. He worked for the state. My mom was a nurse, right? So it was always that, you know, have a sense of service, right? If you're going to do something, make sure you're doing something that is of service,
Okay.
you know, something that is helping somebody, right?
Yeah.
You'll be happy when you do that. So
Okay.
it was always that. And, you know, being an athlete, you know, grew up playing ball. I was a basketball player first.
Okay.
Track just so happened because, you know, I could jump and, you know, that's a whole nother story.
Okay.
But I was a basketball player, right? So like many, many kids, my dream was to go to that league.
NBA.
Right? So, you know, between my parents, my love for sports, my love for hip hop, it was just like, I felt like I could do all of these things, right? I always felt like I could do all these things. And I had these different opportunities would pop up and I would seize the day, you know, jump on the opportunity. But, you know, I think it's just a combination of, you know, my parents in the house and outside the house.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
All
Both
right.
of those things.
And I left something out.
Yeah.
I hear you a PK.
I
Preacher's
am.
kid.
Yeah.
What is that like? How's that
So
growing up like that?
So it's different for me, right? Because my dad started preaching when I was in college. So I was a grown man. I was basically a grown man when he started preaching, but my grandfather was a preacher.
Gotcha.
Right? So my Sundays were in church, right? And it was a small church. In Houston, very small church. The choir was me, my brother, my sister, and my mom on the piano.
Oh, okay.
Right? That was the choir. You know what I'm saying? So for me, it was interesting. Right? Because again, while he wasn't a preacher while I was growing up, he was on his way to being a preacher.
Gotcha.
You know
He was
what I
on
mean?
that path.
He was a deacon. So, you know, a lot of church on Sundays all day. You know what I mean? All of that whole thing.
I find it
You know what I'm
interesting. A
saying?
lot of people who are in or end up in music get their start in the church.
That's really, yeah, you know, and we'll probably talk about this too. It's transferable skills. You know what I mean? You know, I think a lot of my life was built off of, man, if you can do this, you can do that.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it's that standing up in front of the church, you building that muscle, right? I can stand up in front of people and I can do something.
Yeah.
Whether that's talk, whether that's sing, you playing the drums, you playing the piano, you getting exposed to standing up in front of people and doing something. Mm-hmm. And I think that is very, very, I mean, if you can do that, if you can start there, and that's just where most people start, right?
Yeah.
I can stand up in front of people, I can do something. Now you're in school. You got a presentation.
Right.
You're standing up in front of people, you're doing something. You get the job. Now you're standing up in front of people, you're doing something.
Right,
you know what I mean? So back to my, if you can do this, you can do that.
Yeah.
You know what I
sense.
mean?
Makes sense.
The confidence that had to build at a young age.
Well, you know what's funny is it killed my confidence.
Ooh. Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I don't know, I'm pretty sure you can hear this on the mic. My voice is somewhat unique. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And the first time I ever in my life got up in church and it was my song and it was like on me, I get up, I sing, and the kids at the church was like, man, you sound like a frog. You sound like a frog, man. You sound like a frog. I'm like, a frog? Really? Like, all right, whatever. And, you know, that's when I started to, like, accept that, you know, that's what you have. All right, go ahead. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's kind of like fellas like us and our looks, right? Like, we'll find out early in life, well, man, my nose is big. You know? And most of us just be like, well, that got a big nose. Yeah. We're going to roll with it. You know what I'm saying? So same thing with the voice and, you know, kids at the church making fun of me. Like, oh, man, you sound like a pig, a frog. A frog? Word? Okay. Interesting. You know what I mean? Yeah. So what I did not know was from that time being a kid to, you know, really growing up and then getting on the mic and rapping, I was always trying to find my voice. Mm. You know what I mean? Yeah. And eventually I found it. Mm.
Yeah. So you said it killed your confidence, right? Yeah. So how did you get it back? I mean, you just talked about it, right? You said you were searching for your voice. Was that building your confidence or was there something else that happened?
Man, you know, I think when I realized that I could write, when I could write, writing became my voice, right? So I could write and I could hear what I'm writing in my head. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So, of course, the first thing I was writing was rhymes, right? Mm-hmm. So I could hear how I want it to sound, but when I record myself, I hear this frog. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if this is how I necessarily want to sound. But, you know, through that, figuring out what works and inflections and how to do this and do that and carry stuff out. I'm like, oh, people like this part of what I'm doing. Okay. And then, you know, when I got to probably middle school, you know, we at the table, beating on the table, rapping and whatnot. And I could see people responding to how I would do different things with my voice. That's when I started building confidence.
Okay. So believe it or not, I was a shy kid, and you just took me to this place. I was a shy kid, and I didn't speak much in spaces in front of people at all. It wasn't until I started writing, because I told you we had that in common. Yeah. When I started writing in school, and my writing started getting praise, that I connected with people who cared about what I had to say.
Yep.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah.
So say more about that, though. I think that part of the shyness was, I think I was a very sensitive kid. And because I was a sensitive kid, oftentimes the love that we've shown, right? We've talked about this. The love that we show in our community doesn't always feel like love. It feels like people making fun of you, people thinking you're less than, right. but it's oftentimes their love language, right? The way I internalized that as a kid was, well, I'm not good enough and let me be quiet so that people don't expose me. It wasn't until then I made that transition to where I'm writing and I started getting praise like, oh, well, maybe I got something. Maybe I got something that people can value. Maybe I got something that people will appreciate. And then that started to give me confidence about even being not just outspoken on paper, but in person. Yeah.
Okay. A lot of power in that.
Yeah. There is.
A lot of power.
So, all right. So you get to middle school,
Started to build your confidence. Okay, so well, you were track. You went to school for track.
So college?
Yeah.
Yeah, went to college for track. So I started it was odd. So again, I was a hooper, right?
Right.
I'm in the gym, we dunking and showing out for the girls.
Yeah.
And track coach walks in and he's like, "Man, you could jump, you should come out and run track." I'm like, all right, sure. My homeboys out there. Look like a good time, you know what I mean? We get a Subway sandwich every Saturday. Big deal. Like a whole foot long. Sign me up, I'm there.
Yeah.
So first year, again, was 11th grade. I was decent. You know what I mean? My senior year, somehow or another, it all came together. Just the door unlocked. First track meet of the year, jumped the biggest jump I ever jumped in my life. And from that point on, that year, man, I ended up, going to state. I became All-American, became highly recruited, the whole nine, like in a matter of, and I wasn't even thinking about it. I was just going out there for Subway, But it just so happened I had a good coach and I could jump, you know what I mean? So it all came together, came All-American, went to college for it, 96 Olympic trials, like, crazy.
Wow, damn, dude. Yeah. You don't do anything halfway.
That's an interesting way to put it. Nah, I don't. Because all I see is the end. For me, it all looks like whatever it looked like in my head before I even started it. I always see, okay, I'm not getting in a business for it to fail.
Right.
It's not my thing. You know what I mean? Anything that I do, I just see the end.
But also really quick, something I know is you shared with me that you don't do stuff that you don't think you're good at.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's one of my things. I always say that. Like, I'm good at everything I do because I only do things that I'm good at.
So now let me ask you the converse question.
Yeah.
Are there things that you just in your mind think you're not good at, so you don't even attempt?
No, it's things that I have discovered that I'm not good at, and I've accepted it.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like, for example, I have finally come to grips with the fact that I'm not handy man at home. look, I have
you know built some shit.
Shit, I had too many bookshelves fell down, and man, bro. If I put it together, you know who put it together because you sit in it.
You pay twice for it.
Yeah,
sometimes 3 times for it.
Yes. So I have come to grips that that's not my thing. That's not my talent.
Okay, wait. So, am I hearing right? So, one thing I know about successful people in life is they can be very hard-headed, very stubborn. Would you say that's you?
Yeah, that's my wife, probably. I'm a Taurus.
Well, you asked
say
less.
So I think naturally I might be a little stubborn somewhat, but it's more, I look at it as more determined.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
Set a goal, achieve a goal.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of how it should go.
Hey, tag me in. Go for it. Yes, he's stubborn.
Wait, that's what it's hard for me to answer. I think I'm perfect.
Self-awareness. You gotta be self-aware.
Yeah. That's true. That's true.
Excuse me again. Okay, this is where I was going. We set a goal, we achieve a goal. But sometimes we set a goal and we fail. Right? And sometimes I mean, dude, I learn more in failure than I do in success. Yeah,
because that failure is what drives you.
Absolutely, but
so do we really fail?
Good point.
Right.
I can't. So talk about that some more.
Yeah. So that's the question: do we fail or do we quit? It's always that.
Let that breathe.
Yeah. Do we fail or do we quit? Do we? You working towards a goal. You working towards a goal. It's not happening how you want it to happen. Then you quit. Who's to say if 2 more weeks of grinding would have got you there? Maybe not 2 weeks, 2 more months. But I always feel like as long as you are walking in that direction, you're going to get there. And it's not always going to be on our time. I think what we get caught up in is the time, right? We want it to be now. We want it to be when we want it, but it's not always like that. And for me, in my experience, it's never been like that. Like, and that started early for me, right? Like realizing that, man, stuff just don't go my way. You know what I mean? Like I was the kid, and this is, if we were going to Six Flags, Astroworld or whatever, it was going to rain that day. Like, set your watch to it. You know what I mean? If it was something that was supposed to be a big deal that was supposed to happen for some odd reason, they can't do it on this day. And this was my experience, like, forever. But what it did was it built the muscle that I didn't know that I needed, that now I flex all the time. You know, and that's understanding that, you know, hey, man, it may not happen how you want it, when you want it, but, you know, some things you just got to brush off and keep on moving and keep on pushing because, you know, hey, it rained because you planned on going. Or was it going to rain anyway, right? Oh, okay, it was going to rain anyway. So what we going to do? We're not going to be mad because it's raining. We're going to go outside and we're going to dance in the rain. And that's pretty much how I now move because I understand just through experiences growing up that, man, it's probably not going to go your way. Like, I don't know if that was good or bad, but it worked for me because so many things just were not going, you know, it was just not going my way. And what's interesting now is I see a lot of these, I say youngsters, these kids nowadays.
Yeah, we old.
Yeah. And their experience is not that.
Right.
You know what I mean? It was quite the opposite. Everything did go their way. If they go into Six Flags, it's a sunny day. And matter of fact, you got the fast pass. You're not waiting in line. You just whoop, 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 whoop. It's all easy. But when it gets hard and something don't go your way, now you don't know how to move in this space.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I just believe the way that my experience happened, it happened the opposite way. So I was able to kind of, you know, pivot on that.
Yeah, I connect with that because I'm a firm believer that the universe typically doesn't meet your expectations, but eventually exceeds them.
Yeah, that has definitely been my experience.
So you talked about how, you know, as an adolescent, let's call it that, things didn't go your way. How did you build the muscle to be like, all right, well, I'm going to just either persevere or change directions? I mean, because not everybody builds the muscle in that way.
Yeah, you know, old saying that all that crying, what the baby gonna do? That's what
All right.
You be mad about it all you want.
Right.
You can be sad all you want. But what is that going to change? Nothing. Go give you a headache from all that crying. Shut up, get in there. You know what I'm saying? We'll go next week, you know? So that's just how it was, man.
Right.
That's just what it was. And, you know, it was frustrating a lot. You know, it was frustrating. Yeah. Go to college. My car, I have a beautiful Mustang. Sitting on Dayton's, music,
Okay. All right.
everything.
All right, straight out of Menace.
Straight out of Menace. Beautiful Mustang. Oddly enough, every time it's time to go to the party or go to the club, my music don't want to work. What happened? I'm in the that kind of stuff, right? Like every time it's time to do something, there's you didn't get to do it how you want to do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just always how it was. It's crazy.
But I'm telling you, like, I know lots of people who that doesn't build a resiliency muscle, right? It builds a muscle of downtroddenness, depression.
I can see that.
A mindset of victimhood.
Yeah.
I can see that.
So I'm real curious, like, how does that not happen for you? Like, what in your life? So 2 questions. What in your life shapes that? And then what advice do you have for somebody who doesn't build that muscle in that way? How can they build that muscle?
Man, that's a really good question. You know, I think my parents did a good job of making sure we were self-aware. You know, we had to do a lot of the checks where, what did you do? What's your part in it? And back then, it seemed like they were attacking us. Like, I didn't do nothing. But, well, this keeps happening. What are you doing? Right? So that put me in a position to where I was always kind of introspective. Didn't know that's what it was called.
Yeah.
But I did a lot of, checking myself. You know what I mean? And I think that really helped me understand that, and just keep on living too. That part too is, understanding if it's raining today, it's not going to rain tomorrow.
Right.
But that perspective, I think, came from my parents. You know what I mean? If I was to advise somebody else on how to do it, because I do every day with my daughter, I try to help her see that, it's not necessarily going to happen when you want it to. You know what I mean? I think it's the patience of it, and it's the never giving up kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, that's ingrained in me as well. So, and being very goal oriented. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like if you have a target, you have something to hit. If you do not have a target, you just throw it in the wind.
Mm-hmm.
Give yourself a target, but don't necessarily give yourself a time. That kind of thing. Like, but I don't know. That's a really good question.
Well, but I heard you say two things. Two things resonated with me. One is don't give up.
Yeah.
And the second was set goals.
Yep.
Right. And we had another guest on was saying the same thing. It's like you don't have. So if you want to save $1 million, you're not going to deposit $1 million in the bank.
Right.
It might be $1 here. It might be $5 here. It might be $10 here. And so your point about not setting a time frame.
Right.
I do have a follow-up question on that. Because as you well know, we all set these smart goals, right? And it's all, got to be time oriented.
Yeah.
So what is your thought on that? Like, I mean, I'm sure, there's cases where you do and some cases where you don't. So what do you think about that?
Well, here's the question. That time lapses. You done? Or do you keep moving? Right?
Yeah.
So I'm a person who time lapses, keep on going. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, really, I think my advice to somebody who's trying to figure that part out is, man, don't give up, and it's not on your time.
Mm-hmm.
Stay the course. You know what I mean? And the best question that you asked is, where did I get that from?
Yeah.
Because that's the part that I'm really thinking. I really think it just had to come from I think it came from my parents, for one, and I just think experiences, too. But there was something that I'm trying to figure out that made me think like that.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What made me? Because I have a lot of different examples.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people, we all come from the same place. We did exactly the same thing, and
different
ways.
Yep.
For
Absolutely.
whatever reason. But where that came from, I don't know.
Well,
I'm curious about this, about the time lapse piece, right? And this came to me as you were speaking about, is there a point in which you cut your losses and say, all right, I've been at this for whatever amount of time. Should I stop? Like, is there some indicator of like, yeah, I need to abandon this versus continuing to push towards this goal?
Depends on the reason.
Yes. Say more about that.
Depends on your reason. Why are you doing it? Right? Are you doing this because it makes you happy?
Mm-hmm.
Are you doing this because it makes you money? Are you doing this because it makes you happy and money? Right? That is something I can speak to with hip hop. Do you stop doing it because you not making any money? You spending too much money? It all goes back to your why are you even doing it?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I believe, depending on what that thing is, if you're doing it because you love doing it, you enjoy doing it, keep on doing it. And the rest of that stuff may come, it may not come, but if you're fulfilled with what you're doing, you're going to be happy. If you're doing it for money, that's when you got to start thinking timeline.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you're spending money.
Absolutely.
And you're not getting money. You know what I mean? Those things, yeah, you got to put a cap and a timeline on. But things that you're doing for passion because you love doing it, like me, like, am I in the studio rapping and recording and stuff? No. But do I write all the time?
Mm.
Absolutely. And I write because I love doing it. Now, as far as the other piece of it, being in the studio, being on tour and doing all that, man, look here,
You don't miss it.
have no desire. Like, it's like, when I think about that, it's almost like another lifetime ago, almost. You know what I mean? Like, oh, yeah, that was a part of it.
So speaking of that, how did you get into hip hop? Like being in a group and performing and touring?
Yeah, man. Love hip hop, man. Started early for me. Started off rapping in the middle school, you know, lunch table.
On the lunch table.
There was some people at that lunch table right now. we had some we had some stars at that lunch table that grew up, and you know. Then in high school, so I'm a class of 95, right? So being in Houston in that mid to late 90s, now 95 when I graduated is just before the world became familiar with Houston hip hop scene. Right. A lot of the Screw, and we had the Swisher House, and so DJ Screw is who most people. So on the north side of town where I'm from, we had the Swisher House, which was Michael Watts started it.
Okay.
And this was because, DJ Screw on the south side, they used to talk so bad about the north side. It's like, we love Screw. But, it's not that they talk bad because they meant to. It's just that you're on the south side and you freestyling and you might say something that people on the north side may not agree with. Right. So Swisher House got started on the north side, and that's kind of where Houston really started bubbling, right? So then I was like a senior in high school. My brother was still in high school. I was a senior. I was graduating from high school, and my brother was coming into high school. Now, the high school that I went to, a lot of the Swisher House cats went there.
Gotcha.
That you would easily recognize. So they really started just getting it homegrown, just the freestyling and the whole thing. And this is stuff now that I had been on, right? So once they started that, the Run C, who was the DJ for them, they put us on me and my boy Fred, our group was lower level, they put us on some mixtapes. And after that, it was up from there. Up from there. Yeah. Then, I was in college at the time, so I was not there in Houston while the whole movement was just exploding. But, we were on the tapes.
Gotcha.
And which that meant a lot back then. So, that really is where it kind of started like on a level where people could actually hear our music that we were making. And then being in college, man, like, in the late 90s, everybody wasn't rapping yet. I was the rapper. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we're doing parties and, it was just, it was life. It was everything.
So what
yeah.
So you toured.
Well,
right?
Yeah. So fast forward, we recorded our first album, me and my boy Fred, again, lower level without. Recorded our first album, had some dope songs on there. Juvenile was actually going to the studio. We were recording it. He heard our joints. He loved us. Next thing we know, we were him.
Oh.
You know what I mean? So now we doing, shows with him, going out of town. We on the bus. He got the studio on the bus. And coming, again, I'm just getting out of college, right? And this is 2000. So if you remember, Cash Money was taking over for 99, 2000. This was 2000, 2001.
Yeah. Right.
And Juvie had just branched off and started his own label, which was UTP. So, hey man, it was on.
Right. So I want to get into more of the I don't know how I want to say this, but let me just ask this question, right?
Yeah.
So you talk about building confidence. You talk about middle school. So do you just step on that stage and you're fully blown confident I'm good? Or is it like, I'm imposter syndrome, do I belong here?
No, not back in those days. Because, for us, hip hop, like, we wanted to show. Like, it was about, you need to hear this. Yeah. You know what I mean? It was all about, no. You need to hear this. We're about to.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were full blown, just confident, just doing the damn thing.
Yeah, we was. By the time all of that stuff started happening, I was walking in my light at that point. You know what I mean? I was confident in what I was writing, what I was saying, and what I felt like I could bring. I wanted people to see it. So I was.
So something just dawned on me, right? So you said you graduated from college?
Yeah.
Did you mourn track?
No.
You were done.
Man, look.
So it literally had its season.
Yeah. Put it like this.
Yeah.
We had morning weight, 6 o'clock in the morning, every day for my track career. When I stopped running track, I said, I will never, ever do another leg day. Man, I didn't do a leg day for 20 years. It was 20 years before I got back up. Man, no, I did not miss it at all. No. It was fun. I loved everything about it. But when it was over, it was over. Like, I got fat and everything. I'm done.
It's funny because you have a daughter who's a student athlete. I have a daughter who's a student athlete in high school.
Yep.
And I worry about that for her. Like, 'cause there's gonna come a point where soccer is done, right? And I'm like, identity. Yeah. Like I'm just, I don't know. That's just something as a father that I worry about for her. I mean, now she's in high school. I mean, we're starting this whole recruiting thing. That's a whole
nother thing.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing that we'll get into. It probably won't even get into. Yeah. But I don't know. It's just something that I thought about. And when you said, I graduated, I was like, man, you're just done with track and then hip hop. Now you had something to walk into.
Yeah, I mean, I always looked at myself as an MC first, like that. By the time I got to college, it was like, all right, this is what we're doing. Because there I met my producer. Like, I met a lot of people that I met in college ended up, being producers and writers and things like that. And it was just a time, and we were all in the same space. You know what I mean? Even in high school, so I went to high school on Northside. So some of my really tight homeboys went to HSPVA, which is Houston High School Performing and Visual Arts.
Gotcha.
And I mean, Brian Michael Cox.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Robert Glasper. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were there. So we were all...
Well, y'all performing.
You were part of excellence.
Yeah, I mean, the level of the stuff that was getting done, and this was before anybody was anybody. Yeah. This was, we were in school.
Yeah.
And my homeboys who were there were artists, which is the reason I love art now is because of those guys. So, you had visual artists. Right. So you had them doing these amazing art pieces. And then the names I just mentioned, that's your music program. Those kind of guys are.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? Like,
that's a whole level.
That's the singers, level. Then the actresses that had come out of there from that, say between class of 93, 97, like a lot of people went on to do a lot of great things.
Wow.
So I was surrounded by like a bunch of young people who were like extremely talented, but just hadn't, the moment hadn't come yet.
Gotcha.
And now for a lot of them, it has. Like some of them are some of the biggest stars in the world.
So here's what's coming up for me is, knowing you like I know you, like I know a lot of this, a lot of things about your journey. And you've shared with us a lot about the resiliency, about, the determination. Talk a little bit about the struggle. Talk about those moments of struggle and kind of how you had to navigate that.
I mean, it's all struggle.
So, before we go there, actually, we need to go ahead and take a break.
Okay.
Follow us on social where we can continue the conversation.
So before the break, we were talking about struggle, right? And I was curious about, as you were going through those different phases of being the athlete, being the entertainer, and you talked about, the confidence building, you talk about the resilience. I was curious about the struggle that you dealt with during that time and how you navigated that.
Let me say something to the audience real quick, because I know we all struggle. Those who are out in the audience, those who are watching, engage on our social so we can continue the conversation to help you with that struggle. All right, bro.
Right on. The struggle, right? So, interesting. I look at it as struggle is perception. You know what I mean? It's perception. Are we struggling, or are we just going through what we have to go through to get to where we're trying to get? You know what I mean? and being able to identify that, you know what I mean, versus not.
Right.
So I feel like words are powerful. You know what I mean? And I feel like in our community in particular, we use the word struggle a lot. We use the word grind a lot. And a lot of the times, could that word be interchanged with work, hard work, getting to it, getting after it? You know what I mean? Like, so struggle is perception, depending on what you're talking about.
Is it happening to you or is it happening for you?
Is it happening to you or is it happening for you?
Well, okay. I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with what you're saying. However,
there is struggle. Not saying that there is not struggle.
Absolutely. But, right, because I know for me, when you're in that struggle, it's hard to see the perception of that struggle.
Sure.
Right? So, your journey of having confidence and being on stage, but in the quiet recesses of your mind or the quiet times, how are you dealing with the struggle to get to the point where you realize it is perception?
Yeah, man. How do you deal with it? You know, you just, man, for me, it's always just been keep going. You just keep going because you will get there. Right. You know, depending on the scale and those type of things. Now we started talking about, you know, I call those vanity stats, right?
Gotcha.
Okay, for example, I made it to college. This is good. I'm in college. But I didn't get into Harvard. You know what I mean? Oh, I made the team, but we lose every game. You know what I mean? So what are we fighting, right? Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. But again, that is something that comes with age and experience.
Right, exactly.
Right?
Because that's what I'm saying. It's like, especially as you're younger,
you have no concept of these types of things. Mm-hmm. And, you know, listening to people that's trying to tell you these type of things doesn't really resonate. Right, exactly. And what I realized is the reason a lot of the things that older people try to impart on kids, it doesn't resonate because they don't have that breadth of experience. It can't resonate because
That's a very good point.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We try to lay these heavy concepts, which would be great if these kids could grasp them. But they don't have the, you know.
There's no reference point.
There's no reference point.
You give them this advice and it's just like, okay, but I don't know what that means.
Right. I can tell you, keep working towards your goal and you will be successful. The reason I can say that is because I worked towards my goal and I've been successful. Exactly. But for somebody else who has not worked towards the goal and succeeded at that yet, I feel like you have to show them things that they haven't quite seen. You know?
Let me ask you this follow-up question. Was there right? So obviously you've painted the picture that you've been a resilient person all your life, right?
That's so. I never thought about it.
But was there a person, a thing, right? Because we all have those moments in our life where we doubt ourselves, right? Yeah. That's just what it is, right? But what thing or event or whatever helps reinforce the keep going.
That part.
Yeah. What is there something, or is it just like that's all I do is tell myself that? Or do I have a mentor? Or do I have, you understand what I'm getting at?
And how did that become the story you told yourself?
Yeah, I think if you really pay attention to what's going on, not only in your life, but other people's life, you can see it happen. And once you see something happen, you can be like, okay, I can do that.
So who or what was that for you?
That's a really good question. I had just about a month ago, I had to fly to Houston for a funeral to bury my boy Byron. Byron is a little bit older than me. He just passed away. He was 59. So when I was 14, 15, living in the neighborhood, he moved in next door.
Okay.
So he was like 25.
Okay.
Right? Thing about Byron that was different from anybody I ever met in my life. Well, I can't say anybody I met in my life, but Byron was like 24, 25. He was married. Him and his wife was pregnant at the time, and they were moving into a home. Right?
Yeah.
Byron would get off of work, He would come outside. He would play in the streets with us, playing basketball, football. Like, he gave us, he was an example of something that we didn't see from like our parents who were older than him.
Yeah.
My dad, for example, he went to work, he came home, he went in his room. That was it. You know what I mean? The weekends, the whole old school parent thing. They too tired. He was still young. He's married. He got a child, but shoot, he get off. He boom, let's get it. Let's boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
So that started off as, we were teenagers. He had us, doing teenage things.
Yeah.
And the older we got, the more he introduced us to, the right way to do the wrong thing. You know what I mean? Like, if you're going to do this, do it like this. Don't do it like that.
Gotcha.
If you're going to do that, don't do this. You know what I mean? Like, he was that guy. And, he was from New Orleans. He had a degree and he had a career and he was young. So I remember one day we had this conversation. I'm like, bro, like, what do you do? Like, you bought a house. Like, how does that happen?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And at the time, he was trying to explain it to me. He was in logistics, right?
Got it.
So he was in logistics, supply chain. He was doing stuff worldwide, stuff, a lot of work in Africa and stuff like that. And we used to just look at him like, dude, how are you like this? You know what I mean? You super duper cool in the hood with the fellas, but you have this other life at work where you just, VP in corporate America. Like, how you move like this?
Yeah.
So I would say he is the person who showed us, everybody in the neighborhood, because I'm telling you, that funeral, the whole hood, we were all there.
Yeah.
And I would have to say he showed us that you can do these things if you want to. You know what I mean? And you don't have to be somebody else, right? You can do these things being yourself. And that was really important to me, which is where I actually met Malik in my journey was, figuring that part of stuff out, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can work in corporate America and you can be who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, people gonna respect you more if you are who you are.
Mm-hmm.
So, when I started working, me and Malik worked together, I do these big presentations, they'd be big and a lot of people there. And after all those presentations with all those people, I go find Malik. Be like, bro, you know what I'm saying? Did I keep it real? Because for me, it was very important for me to be myself and not that work version of myself who I deleted years ago. Like, I don't do that anymore.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I got very comfortable with just being me, and then the response that people had for me just being me. Yeah. But to answer your question, Byron Williams.
All right.
My guy.
Rest in power. Knew, yes, absolutely. Rest in power. I knew there had to be something or somebody, right? Because I feel like we all have those things and we have those people, right, that help to shape us, right? And a lot of times, it's not our family. Right. So I just wanted to pick that thread because I had a feeling there would be something there. Yeah. But having said that, right? So you're a hip hop artist, right? You're touring. How does that end, and how do you become a family man and entrepreneur?
Look, that's funny. So, there comes a time in every man's life, like straight up. It just, I always. Again, going back to the parent thing, I always have something to fall back on. Reason why, I'm not going to say that's the reason why I went to college. The whole college thing was interesting. The way it came about with the scholarships and all that kind of stuff. I'm sure I was going to go, but I was just a kid who had not put a ton of thought into it. You know what I mean? It was like, got senior year came and it was like, all right.
What next?
One more year. Let's see what's going to happen. It just so happened to work out,
Gotcha.
I kind of lost my track.
Talking about transitioning out of hip hop, becoming a family man.
Right. So the transition was natural, to be quite honest. Like, I always worked. I always had a job, no matter what we were doing. I worked because I liked money, and I wasn't about to do the whole struggle thing. Like, for what? I got a degree. Right. So I wanted to. Figure out what to do with that degree which was all about for me at that time, because I didn't know much else, was, okay, I can go find a good paying job and make some good money.
Right.
But in the background, this is who I really am. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm really on this mic and I'm really doing these things. So, man, I get off work. I get off work 5, 6 o'clock. Say we had a show.
Right.
Say it's in Louisiana. We out. Going down to Louisiana, perform, get back to Houston about 3, 4 in the morning.
Dang.
Depending on what time it was, like if I got home at 4, I knew not to go to sleep because I had to be to work at 7.
Yeah.
And at 3 hours, it was too much of a struggle. Yeah. Now, 2 hours is different, you know? I had it all figured out. If I get 3 hours of sleep, that's a little bit too much. I'm going to be groggy. But if I get 4 hours, you know what I mean? Like I had a plan.
Yeah.
So, I wouldn't even sleep for days sometimes. We would just, come in, I come home, take a quick shower, boom, head off, go to work.
Well, damn.
Boom, come back. I did that.
Oh.
Man, I did that for years. Wow. Probably, yeah. And I never really cared about jobs. So I had a bunch of them, right? Some stuff would be going on. All right, I ain't gonna make it to work. Yeah. Boom, that's that's what that is. I had to go do this, I had to go do that. So, looking back on it, it's interesting. It makes me ask myself questions about, man, what if I would have gave it 100% and just focused on just that? Then on the flip side of my mind, I'm like, let's sleep on couches and stuff. I just wasn't about that.
Yeah.
So, it's the balance, right?
So what I really was trying to get at is, how was that transition, out of hip hop? And I heard you said, maybe if you'd have given it your all, but at what point do you say, all right, it's time to do something different and then become a family man?
I think it was natural. Because I was falling in love with something and falling out of love with something at the same time. Right? For me, now you asked me about track and was it emotional?
Yeah.
No. Hip hop was like a breakup from a long-term spouse.
Okay.
Right? And the reason it was like that is because, it changed on me.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
These shiny suits.
It changed on me. And the thing that I love the most, I was falling out of love with. You know what I mean? Like, it was not fun anymore. It was not exciting anymore. The money was not, now it's internet and it's streaming and it's, it was just, the dynamic, it was just changing.
Yeah.
And it was going to a place that I didn't necessarily want to go. I just did not rock with it, So as all these things are happening at the same time, right? Like I'm getting a little older, not that that had anything to do with it, but I'm getting older, my priorities are changing. I think it's more of that, you know what I mean, than age. It's the priorities, right?
Got it.
So now my priorities are changing, and then I found a career that I really, really, really enjoy. You know what I mean? Helping people get into places that they've always wanted to, helping people use the transferable skills that I've been talking about. And now I'm getting to talk to people about what they do and how they can go from doing that to this. This is that. You know what I mean?
So before we get too far from the topic, you said it was like breaking up with a long-term spouse.
Yeah.
So now I was thinking you might have mourned track, but it sounds like you mourned hip-hop.
Definitely did.
So what was that transition like emotionally for you?
I actually had to make myself sit down and address it. Right? Because you get all these thoughts in your mind and your mind is racing. Should I do this? All these kind of things going on. And then one day I was like, man, look, I had to have the talk with myself. Like, are we calling a press conference and we saying that this is it? Is that what we saying? And, kind of to our earlier conversation, through that thinking and just processing is why I came to the conclusion that, man, just do what you love, bro. It's not all this pressure. Like, we put all this pressure on ourselves. Like, man, it's not that much pressure. If you love writing rhymes and recording and doing all this, man, go do that. it's going to make you happy, sure, yes, go do that. But the rest of that stuff that you hate about it, you don't have to deal with that. Just find your space in it and just be happy. And, you know, a lot of times I talk to people about that because we have these conversations, especially hip hop and just a bunch of different things that people feel like, oh, maybe you too old, or maybe you shouldn't be doing this, or maybe you shouldn't be doing that for this reason or that reason. My thing to people is, man, do whatever makes you happy. Like, when you stop doing stuff for other people, there's so much power in that, you know?
So you seem extremely self-aware. Like, extremely self-aware.
From an early age.
Yeah.
But not everybody, hell, I wasn't for a long time.
Yeah.
I talk to people who aren't as self-aware as you, who have to deal with that struggle of not knowing they have to reconcile some shit in their life. Like for you, it was leaving hip hop. For them, it might be leaving the spouse, like you said. You compared hip hop. Like how do you think people can get to the point where they reconcile, and what tools do you think that entails?
Yeah, you know, I think one thing I don't think people do enough of is spend time with themselves. Like, you have to, like, think. You know, you got to give yourself space to just think. And if you give yourself space and time, you'll be surprised what's already in your mind that you just don't give yourself time to come to these conclusions. And I think, this is a theory, I think it comes from writing. When you write a lot, especially like I used to write, like Malik, with the writing, you spend a lot of time thinking, you know, and you're thinking about different concepts, you're thinking about, you know, different ideas, different, you know, ways to say this when you can say it this way and that way. That's a muscle, right? And when you are spending that much, I've spent probably more time in thought, just trying to come up with something to say. Like, that's a space. And you can find that space just thinking about your life. You know, I don't think a lot of people spend enough time with themselves, right? Like, you don't get to know yourself, right?
Yeah. So in track fashion, I'm going to take that baton from you.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say what came up for me as you were talking about that was the power of journaling. And how when you're journaling, it gives you the opportunity not to just think, but to explore things that you might not be comfortable exploring in conversation with others.
Sure.
Now you have a conversation with yourself via those pages of the journal.
Yeah.
Now, I was going to also say, because this isn't necessarily a theme of this podcast, but we want to make sure people know it's an option. There's also therapy.
Absolutely. Now, I have a psychology degree. My sister has a psychology degree. My brother's a therapist. My dad is a counselor. So, my aunt, I come from a long line.
Of mental health.
You've been therapized. You learned about it.
Yeah.
You're surrounded by it.
And I actually majored in psychology on sheer accident. I double majored, and it was I just kept taking these psychology classes because they were interesting.
Yeah. And
I ended up having to stay an extra semester, and the counselor was like, if you take one more psychology class, you have a major in it. I'll be here anyway.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So sign me up. But yeah, I think there's definitely place for therapy. And, I think that's one of those things that you'll probably figure out spending some time thinking.
Yeah.
When you start running into questions that you don't have the answer to, you start running into those things and you're like, I just can't get over this hump.
Yeah.
That's, a great place for when therapy comes in, because, it's some things that it takes other people to be able to point out that's within you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's a excellent route to take.
All right. I got 2 final questions for you, and then we got a bit of a surprise.
Okay.
First question. Love to get your opinion on your thoughts about Black men being perceived as the beast in the world.
Interesting. this, are we the beast? Are we the beast? Are we beast? Two different
It's
things.
your opinion. There's no right or wrong.
You know, I always, especially in high school, that was my thing. Cold beast.
Mm.
But the perception of the world, you know, man, honestly, man, fuck what the world think about us.
Mm.
You know why? Because they wrong. Like, people who don't know black people, I don't care what you think.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like, if you haven't got out there and met people, know people, I know everything I need to know about you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what people's perception of us is, I don't really care. I think that our perception of us, what we think about ourselves,
Come on.
is way
Preach,
more
brother.
important.
Preach.
It's
Preach.
way more powerful. Beast, absolutely. Like I said, in high school, that was cold beast.
Mm.
That's who I was. I was a
I love
cold
it.
beast.
Go
But
ahead.
for somebody outside of our community to perceive us as beast, I would say you can use that to your advantage.
Mm.
Or I would say ignore it. Like, if you're going to believe that and fall into it, then that's an advantage.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you're going to look at it, take it from a negative standpoint, depending on who's saying what, then it could be a disadvantage. But, man, yeah, we beasts. We wild animals out here in these streets.
Let me ask you the final question. What, if anything, and I hope there's something, makes you feel loved?
What makes me feel loved? Well, interesting. That's a really good question. What makes me feel loved? So the easy answer is, of course, my wife, my daughter, my family. But that's a very thought-provoking, simple question. Let me ponder. What makes me feel loved? Wow.
You got some alone time coming your way.
You know, I never really thought about what makes me feel love, because I always feel love.
Oh, well.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
I feel like I always feel love. Now, I did come from a house where my mom was very, very loving.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to this day, you're not coming to my mama's house and leaving without red lipstick on. It's just, that's what that's going to be. So, you know, I think I was grown up, surrounded by love.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I know it when I see it. I know fake love when I see it. And I don't deal in it kind of to the point to where, you know, I don't do stuff I'm not good at.
Yeah.
I don't fool with people who don't love me.
I love that. All right. Well, this brother's got something for you. Because one of the things that we do on this podcast is we reach out to people who do love you.
Alrighty.
And we want to know what their experience has been as being a participant to your journey.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So when reaching out to Queen Lynn, not about coaching, but in regards to this,
right on.
she provided some words and said, when I had the honor of providing my perspective on Cedric's emotional journey, my reflections were immediately focused on what the minister said during our wedding ceremony.
Wow.
I'll get to that in a minute. First, let me tell you how we met. It's a story I always use when we play a game at work like 3 Truths and a Lie, because most think it's a lie, and it gives me a chance to talk about how I met the person that changed my life. So the story goes, my colleague came up to me at happy hour and said, "Hey, I think you should meet this guy. He's so awesome. He works with my husband." She's like squealing. "Oh, can we do this blind date? And oh, the last few people we set up got married." She was jumping up and down, and I'm looking at her mortified. I was in my season, focused on my career and pursuing postgraduate classes. Anyway, his colleague, Ashley, got me to meet up in a group setting. Laying eyes on him for the first time, I was like, okay, Jesus. He was different than anyone I had ever dated. He was talking about going to the studio and having concerts. And I'm like, okay, Jesus, now that's a little different. He was also telling me about how he was this basketball player / track jock in college. And I was told by many women that these were the players. I was just all over that player stuff, so there you go. I had to pause. I went back to work and I buried myself in it. Cedric and I would still catch up here and there. And about 3 months later, he called me and was like, hey, you want me to delete your number? I'm like, excuse me? He repeated the question and said, because I'm cleaning out my phone and I want to know if I should focus on you or not. I was really caught off guard and I liked it. So we went on a date and we were able to have such a meaningful conversation about music, family, our faith, the future. I learned about his sister, brother, his parents that were still married and never divorced, much like my family, and walked away from the date saying, thank you, Jesus. For the first few years of our dating, he was busy and passionate about 3 key things. Along with me, his music and group, The Low Level, his family, and his friends. His music required a lot of late nights, but I had this trust in him that I can't explain. I think it's because he always made me feel safe and respected. He thought about things differently, and we had insightful conversations about things I hadn't talked about with a lot of others I dated before, like politics, music, entrepreneurship, and having more than just a job. He's also so much more fun than me, and I love that he got me to try new things. I like sitting by the pool and Ced was scuba diving with sharks. If it wasn't for him, I would have never gone tubing on the Guadalupe or gotten on a jet ski. I was learning how to swim at 27 because of this man. So fun and full of energy. Ced's family is a key part of his journey because they're so close to each other and really have tradition, connectedness, and share a love of God. His mother and father welcomed me in with loving arms. That love and marriage in his family also passed down from his grandparents, married for 60 years, and his siblings as well, both married and never been divorced. When I think of family and Ced's journey, though, it's his grandmother that stands out. Ced's always visiting his grandmother, not letting more than a few weeks go by without visiting her. He loved her caring spirit and food and always hung on to her wise words of advice as if it was the last time we get that advice from her. Lastly, his friends remain an important piece to the emotional journey. Watching Ced with his friends while we were dating taught me what friendship really means. They were always there for each other and supporting each other. He's had the same friends since he was a child or in college. And his friendship is like an extension of our family now, with many of them thinking of my daughter thinking of many of them as uncle. I was always told I was smart. I was top of class, and always focused on books and things like this. But at our wedding, the minister I mentioned earlier caused me to rethink smart. The minister looked me square in the eyes during the ceremony and said, my husband will be the wise one, that I would look to him. He said more of this, of course, but that piece of his statement felt tailor-made for me because it was time for me to really think deeply about being smart versus wise. When we moved away from Houston and eventually made it to Atlanta, I had the chance to really see the wisdom unfold. Lynn had some stuff to get off. No family here to help with our little one. No family here when we needed a sitter, to look for a house or a job. No family to turn to when I didn't know what to do. But that safety instilled from the foundation of our relationship, the faith that brought us where we are today. The wisdom from his adventures, his family, his grandmother showed up, and it sustained us when we were building our family and our future, just as the minister said it would. Today, and now that we've been married for 15 years on July 3rd, it's our daughter that's been our focus. She makes our family complete. Cedric is the most amazing father because all that he brought from the start, my knowing him, is within her. She has the faith, knows what she wants. She loves family and is focused on doing her best as a leader. She's a strong competitor and athletic spirit through her volleyball. She's so fun and so smart. And I know this one day will turn into wisdom just like her father. I cannot thank God enough.
And with that, we're out.